What is up, everyone? Today we are going to break down UFC 312 from a DraftKings DFS perspective. This week's card being headlined by Dricus du Plessis versus Strickland for the middleweight belt. We have 13 fights, two 5-round fights. And before we get into the individual matchups, I want to talk about the overall slate for a second because there is something that stuck out to me. And it's that I believe the pricing is very, very soft this week. Usually we see almost all the best plays are in this 9K range. That is not the case. We have Dricus du Plessis, Strickland, 8,600 and 7,600. We have the co-main 5-round fight, Suarez versus Weili. Perfect pricing, 8.2K, 8K. Weili with one of the highest ceilings on the slate. Arguably the same thing for Suarez, all the wrestling upside you can ask for. So I do believe that the winning lineup will leave salary on the table. And I mean, you look at Bellato, best ITD line on the slate, I think, or one of the best, 8.5K. You got this Tafa fight, 7.8K, and 8.4K. The pricing is really soft, and I don't mean that as a fault from DraftKings because DraftKings, they price it based on the relative win odds, and they did that correctly. You can see Salkiid, the highest priced fighter on the slate, should also be the highest favorite, minus 700, which he is. So as far as the actual pricing goes, they did a good job based on how they always do it. But when you get to actual upside, actual fantasy projections, the best plays are not this 9K range. The best plays are pretty much all within, this 8K down to the 7K, right? So that is something to keep in mind. One other thing before we get started, and we'll talk about this more as we get to this fight specifically, but I think this Weili fight, Weili Suarez, I don't see how it's not getting there. If the field is going to play 80%, I'll play 100. If the field's going to play 90%, I'll play 100. That's one of the first things I'm doing is I'm locking this fight in. And I rarely ever do that, but honestly don't see how this fight fails. So that's one of the things I'm going to be doing. And the main event, du Plessis versus Strickland, I will not be locking in. I do see paths to where that fight doesn't get there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and talk matchup by matchup. Salkiid versus Jubli, 9,600 for Salkiid. And that's a big price for a card that I think has a ton of upside. And you're going to need him to probably finish in round one. You're going to need him to grapple, which he does have. He does have grappling upside. The ITD line's okay. Round one line's not amazing, plus 250. I think it's a very fringy play on a card like this. Now, you can get to it. I don't think the salary will be a problem. If Salkiid is the highest scoring fighter on the slate, you will be able to get to it, but I just don't think that's very likely. There's so many elite fights here. I don't think Salkiid's a priority, and maybe for cash because of the line value that he does have, but it's definitely not one of my favorite GPP plays by any means. And then as far as Jubli, I don't think you'll get leverage. I don't think you'll get a big ceiling out of him. But then again, he's minimum price, 6.6K. So it's an MME play only, and I don't have a lot of interest in him either. Cong versus Brasil. Cong, pure striker, 9,400, and lacking what I think will be any meaningful ITD line. Plus 145, plus 400 round one. It's a really weak play. Brasil, plus 300 to win the fight, 6.8K. If she does win, I got to imagine it will come with takedowns. But is an 80-point decision enough on a card like this? I don't know. So another sketchy play. I'll put Brasil in as a fringy MME play, but not a lot of interest in this fight either. Next up, Alexandre Topuria. I'm not sure which one it is. The brother of the featherweight champion, Ilia Topuria. And there is an interesting storyline for this fight. Colby Thicknesse is Alexander Volkanovski's teammate. So you have Ilia Topuria in the corner of his brother, and then Alexander Volkanovski in the corner of Thicknesse. And I believe that is the fight that they'll make next for the featherweight belt. So a little bit of an interesting storyline there. But 9.3K for Topuria, minus 360 favorite, 1.5 round line. Out of this 9K range, I do think Topuria looks the strongest, at least so far. He looks way better than Cong and Salkiid. And you save the 300 from going to Salkiid. He has wrestling upside. He has that round one upside. I think he's a fine play. Actually, we'll put him in as a yeah. We'll leave him as a fine play. Topuria is definitely one of the better spend ups in this 9K range. And then Thicknesse, it's just a MME only. I don't see him really having any finishing upside. He's already a pretty big underdog as is, and I don't love it. So maybe leave him in for MME, but not a ton of interest in him. Moving on to Steele versus Rongzhu. Cody Steele, minus 230, 9.1K. No ITD line yet on Bet Online, but I imagine Rongzhu will be around plus 300 or so, and I think that's fine at 7,100. He's definitely an underdog I have interest in. And Cody Steele, he has wrestling upside, and I think he'll have an okay ITD line as well. Matter of fact, let's just check. Maybe FanDuel has it up. FanDuel, UFC. Let's go ahead and check if the ITD lines are up here. Double chance. So Rongzhu plus 290. Yeah, I think he's an underdog that you're going to want to get to. And Cody Steele is even money, ITD. I think this fight looks good on both sides. You combine the knockout upside of Rongzhu with the wrestling and finishing upside of Steele, and I think you have a fight that's worth getting to. Let me actually check the Topuria fight now that I have. Topuria. Let's see if the ITD lines are up for this one. Double chance. Minus 200 ITD. So yeah, Topuria is by far one of the best spend ups so far. And then Thicknesse plus 700. Yeah, Thicknesse, just not any interest in him really. We'll move on to the next fight. Kevin Jousset, Micallef. Jousset, I don't imagine having a good ITD line. He's a point fighter. He's a kickboxer with a bit of judo. Minus 240 money line. Plus 145 ITD. I mean, again, he looks like a similar play to Wayne Cong, and you're saving 400, but he's still not a great play. So I don't have a lot of interest in him. And then Micallef, 7.2K, plus 550 ITD. He has a bit of takedown upside potentially, but another fight that I don't have a lot of interest in. Moving on to Gabriel Santos versus Jack Jenkins. Jack Jenkins, point fighting kickboxer for the most part. He'll mix in takedowns, but I don't think he'll be doing that in this fight. Really a fringy MME play on the Jenkins side. Santos, although he has a poor ITD line, I do like the side of this fight a bit better. Just because he does have really good grappling. And if he does find a finish at 8,900, that's certainly in play. So he's my preferred side. Moving on to Matthews versus Francisco Prado. Matthews has some takedown upside in this matchup. Let's see, minus 250. Certainly a healthy money line for his price. Jake Matthews, plus 260 ITD, really poor, actually. Prado, plus 320, that's in play. I think that Prado's the preferred side of this one. And Matthews looks okay. We'll leave him in just because of his grappling upside, but Prado is the preferred side. Park versus Tume. Park, very, very strong play. Grappling upside, finishing upside. Minus 220 favorite. Plus 110 ITD. He's one of the best plays on the slate as far as the metrics go. And Tume, 7.5K. plus 300 ITD. Sign me up for that as well. I think that both sides of this fight look very strong. Next up, main event, Du Plessis versus Strickland. It's going to look good, right? We know that. Strickland, the thing I'll say about him, he has 5 rounds to work with. We've seen in the past, he scores anywhere from 92-ish to like 105 in his 5-round wins. He does have that upside to get to the 110s and stuff, of course, but he's a pure striker, like as pure of a striker as you can get. So you really need him to pump out this volume, and he does do that over the 5 rounds. So you can get 95 to 105 out of him in his wins. 7,600, the price it makes sense. But I will say, if there's a side of the main event that's less likely to get there, it's probably Sean. It could be DDP, honestly. I mean, yeah, he has a lot of upside, takedown upside, finishing upside. I take that back. I think both sides look good. If you do get to lineups naturally without this fight, I think it's okay, but I wouldn't go out of my way to do that. Moving on to Bellato versus Crute. Should be a great fight to target. 2 light heavyweights with a ton of finishing upside. Crute has the takedown upside. But both guys are going to have good ITD lines. Bellato minus 105 at 8.5K. I think this is another elite fight to target. Okay. Next we have Teixeira Tafa, another elite fight to target. You got 2 guys who are going to go in there, swing heavy. One guy's probably going to go down in round 1. Let's check the metrics for Tafa. Pretty much a pick'em fight as far as the money line goes, and the fight is minus 600 to not go the distance, favored to end in round 1. I think someone's making the optimal from this fight. Again, we'll mention it. We always do. If this fight goes the distance, it's probably going to flop. We saw it last week. I mean, I feel like we're speaking it into existence with Pavlovich. The guy's never I don't think he's ever won a decision in his life. And last week he all of a sudden decides to wrestle and win a decision and only scored 85. And I think he was 45% owned. And the Pavlovich took a Zeev swap, ended up winning the tournament last week. So it's always something to keep in mind. The downside for this fight is massive, but you still got to play it. If it finishes in round 1, that's a 110 for either side, and that will certainly provide value at 8,400 or 7,800. Moving on to Borschev Nolan, another striker versus striker matchup. If there is a guy who has takedown upside, it's Tom Nolan, just because we've seen Borschev has literally 0 takedown defense. So if Nolan decides to shoot, I don't think he will, but if he does, he can probably get as many takedowns as he wants. So that is something to keep in mind. But this fight, 1.5 round line, striker versus striker. If it finishes, it's probably going to do extremely well. So I think it's another fight to include as a pretty high priority target. And then last but not least, the main event, or co-main event, excuse me. I already touched on this. I think it's one of the best plays on the slate. Perfect pricing. You get 5 rounds of high-paced women's MMA. Both girls have grappling upside, pace upside, everything you can really ask for out of this price. And it's hard to imagine myself having any lineups without this fight. So that's going to do it. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.